The prisoner already stood condemned, and the sentence was supposed to end with a clear sign of justice. Instead, officials forced a cup to his lips, a so-called sleeping draught, and the name whispered through the crowd: Mandrake. He swallowed because he had no choice. Within moments, his muscles slackened, his head sagged, and his body stopped resisting. Some people read it as mercy, a gentler ending than pain. Others watched for trickery. The problem was that sleep and death looked too similar when fear did the measuring. No one knew the dose or what else was mixed in. As he lay limp and unresponsive, certainty broke apart into suspicion. Around the Mediterranean, mandrake moved from wild ground into trade. People bought it for one promise above all: forced sleep. Healers used it for pain. But sellers also pushed it as luck, lust, and fertility in one route. As it spread, reports followed. Some writers treated mandrake as medicine and listed when it calmed the body, quieted spasms, or dulled suffering. Others repeated claims it stirred desire or helped conception, even when proof stayed thin. That mix created momentum. A single dramatic result travelled farther than careful warning, and every new retelling made the plant sound more certain than it was. Mandrake gained a reputation that outpaced measurement, and people chased it anyway. Classical-era physicians went further than rumour and ritual. They prescribed mandrake on purpose for shattered bones, deep wounds, and cutting that had to happen fast. The goal shifted from easing pain to creating a chosen sleep. That idea changed everything. If a patient could be pushed into unconsciousness, a surgeon gained time and control. People called it mercy because some finally stopped screaming, but the plant never behaved like a measured tool. Doses came from habit and hearsay, not precise weights. One root dulled pain, another stopped breathing. The same cup that bought calm could steal a life. With mandrake, sleep and death sat side by side. As borders changed, the old medical notes did not vanish. They travelled. Scholars translated them, scribes recopied them, and mandrake instructions slipped into new languages, new pharmacies, and eventually into ordinary household remedy books. Each copy made the plant feel more knowable. Measures became fixed on the page. So many grains, so many drops, so many minutes of sleep. The recipe looked stable, the promise sounded controlled. But the root itself refused to match the ink. One mandrake held little strength, another hit like a blow. The written dose stayed the same, while the real risk swung wildly with every harvest. In medieval Europe, mandrake stopped sounding like a medicine and started sounding like a threat. Its forked root resembled a tiny body, and that resemblance fed rumours. People expected a curse from digging it up. Fear did the rest. That fear created demand for safe mandrake, sold as talismans as much as remedies. But few buyers knew the plant well. Traders exploited that gap. Roots got carved to look human. Old pieces got passed off as fresh. Proof became performance. Soon, substitutions spread through the same shadow market. Harmless roots mixed with dangerous ones, and the customer never knew which they held. A dose measured by superstition turned into a dose measured by accident. Poisonings became easier to trigger and harder to explain. Apothecaries turned mandrake into liquids that travelled well: tinctures, syrups, and ready-made sleeping draughts. It rarely went alone. Other nightshades joined the mix, each one promising deeper calm and each one adding risk. Travelling healers carried these blends from town to town, offering the same bottle to many households. Doses got measured by drops and hunches. When the potion worked, it looked like skill. When it failed, it looked like fate. Then something changed. People started collapsing in clusters, one after another, after sharing the same remedy. The pattern felt new and alarming. Whispers followed the bottles, and mandrake started to look like the quiet link. During the Renaissance, educated Europeans began pulling mandrake out of the shadows and into debate. Scholars compared old reports against what they could see and taste. Some called it a natural medicine. Others insisted it carried something unclean. Physicians and herbal writers treated the argument like a test. They described the plant's shape, its smell, its effects on sleep and pain, and they tried to name safe amounts. The more they measured, the less room remained for demons. That shift changed mandrake's status. It sounded less like a curse and more like a drug with rules. But it stayed widely available, and rules spread slowly. People still guessed doses, still mixed it carelessly, and still paid for mistakes. City councils and magistrates met a new kind of complaint. A traveller found dazed, pockets emptied, with no clear blow or blade. Witnesses described sudden heaviness, confused speech, then collapse. Mandrake entered reports as an explanation. Officials treated the stupor like evidence. They traced where victims drank, who offered food, which healers sold powders, and whether other nightshades were named. The plant's reputation made it feel practical, not supernatural. In assault cases, attackers were accused of using mandrake to quiet resistance before theft or violence, leaving victims alive but unable to testify clearly. Courts recorded the suspicion, and mandrake shifted into the category of weapons. By the 1700s, medical writers treated mandrake less like a wonder and more like a problem to manage. They listed its effects as measurable: drowsiness, confusion, and deep stupor. The focus shifted from marvel to dosage. Doctors compared it to other strong narcotics and noticed the overlap. If opium or newer sedatives could do the job, mandrake looked harder to justify. Its place narrowed to rare situations, with warnings that too much crossed into collapse. But outside professional medicine, the old fame refused to die. Stories still promised sleep, love, and power in one root. That reputation kept buyers searching for it and sellers supplying it, even when official advice pulled in the opposite direction. By the late 1800s, mandrake slipped out of regular medicine. New anesthetics and standardized drugs replaced it, and doctors preferred doses they could measure. Mandrake remained too unpredictable. One root soothed, another stopped breathing. Yet it never disappeared. In rural remedies, the name lived on in teas, drops, and homemade sleeping draughts, often without real mandrake at all. And in newspapers and gossip, it returned as a shortcut to silence. So the record narrowed and then broke apart. Scientists studied related alkaloids, but old claims stayed tangled with fear and exaggeration. In the end, mandrake sat between drug and legend, remembered for relief and for sleep that went too far.